They laughed, they overlooked, they dismissed, and they assumed you wouldn't notice. But you did. What they failed to recognize, what most people overlook, is that the most dangerous individual in any room is the one who remains silent but recalls everything. Machiavelli would have smirked at such a moment, because for him, being underestimated wasn't a slight, it was an opportunity. A door left ajar by the arrogance of others. A strategic gift handed to you by people too foolish to realize the chaos they were awakening. He understood a principle better than most. A wise person never interrupts a fool digging their own downfall. And when you're underestimated, when others treat you as invisible, incompetent, or undeserving, Machiavelli would advise restraint. Not because you lack strength, but because silence lays the trap. You don't correct them. You don't argue. You watch. You absorb. And you plan. Because the most powerful response isn't revenge. It's reinvention. The kind that leaves them regretting every smirk, every dismissive comment, every time they looked you in the eyes and saw insignificance. So, what is the coldest Machiavellian response to being written off? It's not a scream. It's not a reaction. It's not even confrontation. It's evolving in silence and revealing your rise with precision. Machiavelli knew that real power is rarely direct. If they roar, you remain still. If they boast, you disappear. If they ridicule, you pay attention. Every time someone disregards you, they let their guard down. They speak too freely. They protect too little. They act as though you pose no threat. That illusion is your armor. And when you wear it well, you gain the most lethal weapon in your arsenal. Surprise. Here's how Machiavelli would approach it. He'd first make himself smaller. Let them feel victorious. He'd nod, offer a smile, retreat into the background. Because people don't fear what's behind, they only fear what's above. And when someone places you beneath their notice, their defenses drop, their ego expands. They reveal more than intended. This is where your strength begins to take root, not on the surface, but within. You sharpen your focus. You study, practice, refine in silence. And all while they continue to dismiss you as irrelevant. What they don't realize is that each laugh nudges you closer to a breakthrough they won't survive. Because a Machiavellian doesn't rise through noise, he rises with purpose. And when the moment is right, he strikes. Not from emotion, not in haste, but with calculation. Machiavelli would wait until the impact was undeniable, a public victory, a power shift, a new role, a new network, a presence they no longer have access to. You don't announce your rise, you don't justify it. You embody it. And then, the very same people who once dismissed you now speak your name differently, in quieter tones, with caution, whispering questions in rooms they no longer control. Wait, when did that shift happen? Since when did they start altering their memories? Pretending they recognized your worth all along, rewriting the past to ease the sting of their own misjudgment. But the harm was never yours to bear. It was theirs. Because now they see your true form, but it's far too late to gain from it. That's the real victory, not in causing them pain, but in becoming entirely beyond their relevance. Those who once had proximity to you now observe from the sidelines. And the more they try to reach, the more they understand they're no longer part of your world. Machiavelli would call that justice in its purest form, not emotional, not reactive, just precise. Because when you stop chasing approval from those who dismissed you, and instead shape yourself into something too undeniable to ignore, too great to dismiss, you haven't just demanded respect. You've inspired regret. And to those who miscalculated you, regret cuts deeper than any loss. There's a turning point where your silence becomes deafening. The same quiet they once mocked now makes them uneasy because everything about you has shifted. You no longer respond. You don't explain. You no longer seek understanding or validation. That's when quiet panic begins to rise, not because you acted out, but because your absence now carries more weight than your presence ever did. Machiavelli understood this metamorphosis. He wrote extensively on the strength of withdrawal not as retreat, but as deliberate psychological warfare. He believed that stepping back from shallow circles forces others to question their power over you. When they belittle you and you vanish instead of retaliating, they assume you've folded. But instead, you ascend, and that unexpected rise is a blow to their pride they never see coming. The first sign of this shift is their curiosity. They start asking around. They reach out not with support, but with concern over how much ground they've lost. What are they doing now? Have you heard? They're up to something. Didn't think they'd make it. But beneath their questions lies fear. Because when you rise silently, without needing permission, applause, or approval, you become untouchable. And in a world built on control and positioning, unpredictability is ultimate power. Machiavelli would remind you, the instant they can no longer read your next move, they begin to respect your game. So you stay in motion. You don't correct their stories. You don't explain your evolution. You don't look back to clarify anything. You emerge like mist, unstoppable and elusive. And as your stature grows, their regret intensifies. Because now, they finally grasp that they never really knew you. They assumed you were gentle, ordinary, easy to dismiss, forgettable. But you weren't. You were just silent and becoming. But you weren't weak. You were charging. You were absorbing. You were decoding how they operated while they remained clueless about what you were evolving into. This is the moment Machiavelli savored, the one where your transformation makes their earlier confidence look foolish. They begin to feel shame not only for how they treated you, but for just how blind and arrogant they truly were. That's when everything flips. The one they counted out becomes the one they now avoid meeting eyes with. The voice they used to talk over now commands attention. The presence they once ignored now walks by with a calm they can't interpret. And everyone else watches with a different kind of respect. Machiavelli wouldn't encourage you to boast. That would lessen the triumph. He'd suggest something colder, more refined. Let their regret ferment in silence. No retaliation. No reminders. No bitterness. Just space enough for them to reflect on their own. Because having to live with the reality of how they misjudged someone who surpassed them, that leaves a mark more enduring than any direct confrontation ever could. They start to compare themselves to you. They try to justify their past behavior. They rewrite their memories. That wasn't serious. We were only messing around. They just happened to get a lucky break, but deep down they know. It wasn't luck, it was silence. And the silent ones with sharp memories, they're the most dangerous. Especially when underestimated. Because they don't just build success, they construct it as a message. A monument meant for the very people who refuse to acknowledge them. And when the day finally comes when they can no longer ignore you, when your presence becomes a mirror to everything they mishandled, you won't need to say a single word. Just being who you are will be the sharpest response they'll ever receive. Initially, they discounted you because they believed you lacked power. But now, they fear you because you never required theirs. This is the Machiavellian shift. Being underestimated grants you a hidden edge, the power to remain unseen. They don't shield themselves from you. They reveal their inner wiring, their pride, their flaws, their insecurities. And if you're smart, you catalog every bit of it like collecting ammunition. Machiavelli never let betrayal go to waste. He turned every insult into insight, every dismissal into strategy. You're not just growing stronger, you're learning exactly how to dismantle them, if that moment ever arrives. But here's what many fail to grasp. Real revenge isn't destruction. It's becoming so unstoppable that they have no choice but to sit in the aftermath silent and watching. They won't cheer. They won't acknowledge it. They'll just stare, wearing the expression only deep regret can carve into someone's face. And in that moment, they'll wonder, what if I had treated them differently? What if I hadn't laughed while they were still climbing? Did I help create this? Machiavelli would respond, yes, you did. Machiavelli would have said it plainly, yes, you did create it. Because those who are underestimated don't just grow, They evolve with memory. Every step you take now is not driven by resentment, but by sharp awareness. You're not chasing revenge. You're building a level of power where revenge is irrelevant. And that kind of power stems from one thing: mastery. Mastery over your emotions. Mastery over your story. Mastery over your surroundings. Mastery over your momentum. This is where most people unravel. As soon as they begin to rise, they crave attention. They want to post, explain, show off. But Machiavelli would call that fragility. He'd say, "Let the crown settle before revealing the king. Be patient." Because the quieter your ascent, the more it unsettles them. The silence drives their minds to spin. They begin to guess what you're up to. They create their own fears. You don't need to embellish anything, they'll do it for you. And then, when the time is right, you let the reality crash in, not through confrontation, but through facts they can't dismiss. Your name appears where they hoped theirs would be. Your work gets recognition in places they can't enter. The people who once answered to them now look to you. That's when the anxiety begins. Not the kind that causes chaos, but the kind that kills slowly. Social irrelevance. They begin to feel obsolete, overshadowed, left behind. And what's worse, they're powerless to change it. Because what you've built isn't fragile. It can't be undone by rumors, jealousy, or desperation. You've built something solid, a reputation immune to their opinions. And now comes the final Machiavellian stroke. You respond with elegance. When you're present, you're composed. When they talk, you don't twitch. When they offer forced praise, you respond with a measured nod and move on. Why? Because nothing breaks a fragile ego more than being overlooked by the one they once belittled. You don't need vengeance. You just need to remain beyond reach. That is the ultimate revenge. Not being feared for your fury, but admired for your impenetrable poise because they expected retaliation. Instead, you became something worse for them. Evidence. Proof that they were off the mark. Proof that their judgment was flawed. Proof that underestimating you wasn't just a mistake. It was their downfall. Now, they see your name everywhere. Not because you sought the spotlight, but because your presence became impossible to ignore. Your silence now carries more weight than their loudest moments ever did. This is where Machiavelli's genius is undeniable. He never needed validation from those who doubted him. He didn't aim for applause. He aimed to control perception. He knew that once your rise is visible, once your reputation enters rooms they've been shut out of, there's no need for retaliation. Reality will humble them for you. Reality handles the retribution for you, and it hits the hardest when it arrives in silence. No need for harsh words. No need for explanations. Just results calculated, graceful, and completely indifferent to whether they notice or not. Now, those who once rolled their eyes when you spoke are quoting your lines. The ones who mocked your vision are mimicking your moves. They scramble to catch up, too proud to admit they ever fell behind. But the Machiavellian doesn't look back. He doesn't offer his hand to those who disrespected him when his name held no weight. Why? Because their underestimation didn't just expose your potential. It exposed their character. And in Machiavelli's world, enemies don't get closure, they get cut off. So what's next? You construct something so grand it dwarfs their insult. A platform they'll never reach. You surround yourself with brilliance sharper than theirs. You ascend so far that by the time they recognize your value, you're no longer the person they once dismissed. And this is where it turns cold. They don't just regret misjudging you, they regret missing their chance to stand beside you. They fantasize about different timelines. What if I had backed them? What if I'd taken them seriously? Would I be next to them now? But daydreams are all they have because you stopped glancing in the rear view. Now, they can't even get close enough to say sorry. That's the Machiavellian tactic. Not to retaliate, but to rise with such focus, such precision, that those who doubted you are frozen in the past while you blaze forward into the future. And don't confuse this with ego. It's not pride, it's memory. The memory of being dismissed, of being silenced, of being underestimated by those with limited vision. You carry it not to wallow in it, but to convert it. Because Machiavelli understood. True power isn't just about position, it's about presence. And now, your presence demands attention. When you enter, the atmosphere shifts, voices lower, postures straighten, thoughts adjust, and those who once shrugged you off, they now sit quietly haunted by the memory of when they had access, before you rose beyond their reach. This isn't revenge, it's transcendence. The most ruthless response to being overlooked is to evolve into the version of yourself they never imagined and now can never touch. Now, the silence has flipped. It's no longer yours they ridicule, it's theirs that betrays them. Because the person they once laughed at, excluded, underestimated is now the benchmark. You are the example. You are the threat. And they're left grasping for reasons, excuses to explain why they didn't see it. But they do see it now. They remember everything. And they desperately hope you've forgotten. That's what keeps them awake. Because deep down, they understand one brutal truth. The most dangerous adversary is the one who remembers and waits. Machiavelli didn't advocate for reckless revenge. He believed in legacy-level consequences. He believed in letting your quiet success corrode the credibility of those who once tried to erase you. And now, with no effort other than your growth, that's exactly what you're doing. You've become a living contradiction to every assumption they ever made. You're proof their judgment was faulty, their perception lazy, their arrogance too loud to recognize greatness staring back at them. So what's their move now? They act. They oversmile when they see you. They offer exaggerated praise in public. They spin tales implying they always believed in your potential, but their eyes say otherwise because praise that arrives too late is never genuine. It's self-preservation. Machiavelli would say, when those who betrayed you return with flattery, it's not loyalty, it's fear. So you owe them nothing. No fury, no response, no space at your table. You give them the gift of distance. And while they orbit your world, desperate for the smallest sign of inclusion, you build deeper, more loyal alliances. You surround yourself with people who believed in you before the accolades, before the status, before the crown, because true power isn't just who you keep close, it's who you keep out. And the colder your silence, the louder your message becomes. You had your moment. You wasted it. Now you spectate. That's Machiavellian justice in its most refined form. No fireworks, no collapse, just steady, undeniable ascent, while they sink under the gravity of their own insignificance. But here's the final truth. You never needed their regret. You didn't climb to prove them wrong. You rose because they were never right. Their view of you wasn't a boundary. It was your ignition point. And the second you saw that, you stopped fighting for their approval and started constructing a kingdom that excluded them entirely. That's how you win. Not with conflict, not with revenge, but by becoming untouchable, not only in title, but in narrative. Because now, every time they retell what happened, they must distort it just to protect themselves from the truth. They can't afford to admit they once dismissed someone who became legend. So they edit the timeline, they place themselves in your orbit, they try to obscure the facts. But history isn't shaped by volume, it's shaped by impact. And you left a mark that can't be erased. Eventually, the story no longer belongs to them. Yes, they underestimated you. Yes, they mocked, ridiculed, excluded. But now their role is set in stone, a footnote, an early act, a cautionary tale. Because you didn't just succeed, you became a signal. A walking reminder of why it's dangerous to ignore the quiet ones, the outsiders, the unseen. And that, as Machiavelli would put it, is the purest form of power, the kind of transformation that leaves those who once misjudged you in quiet disgrace. No battles, no explanations, just a steady, silent shift in position. Where they once stood above you, now they shrink, beneath your presence. Where they once tried to define your limits, now they scramble to justify themselves. But you don't dwell on that because real power doesn't linger in old wounds. It uses them to build something greater. Machiavelli taught that the essence of power isn't just in the ascent, it's in what you construct after you've arrived. And now that you're here, the one rule is simple. Don't stop. Don't fall for cheap validation. Don't look back for applause from the same hands that once dismissed you. You keep advancing with more precision, more depth, more focus. You build legacy, not noise. Infrastructure, not fleeting applause. And soon, people stop asking who you are. They start asking how you became this. And the answer? You became this because they counted you out. Because they taught you early on not to rely on recognition. Because they revealed how hollow praise is when it comes from the wrong people. So you learn to sharpen your thoughts in silence, to grow under pressure, to convert every slight into strategy. You didn't want sympathy, you wanted control. And now, they witness the fruits of that strategy in real time. Your image appears in places they were promised. Your name is whispered in rooms they desperately tried to reach. And they realize you didn't just claim your place, you replaced them. You became everything they pretended to be. And that isn't vengeance, it's justice. Brutal justice. Not a balancing of scales, but a clean separation from their relevance. And now, the rules have shifted. You're no longer chasing respect, you're building a name that will outlive those who doubted it. You become a force that alters the atmosphere the moment you walk in. You become a symbol that needs no words to leave a mark. You become a story etched in the minds of those who once tried to silence yours. So let them whisper. Let them regret. Let them revise the story however they want. The truth is already etched in stone. They underestimated you and you gave them the one thing they truly earned. Nothing. Except a front-row seat to the rise they never saw coming. That's the most surgical Machiavellian response. Not fury. Not revenge. But a transformation so undeniable, so complete it humiliates the idea that they ever believed you were beneath them.